Well, welcome everybody to another week of the Unforgettable Event Experience Live Show. I'm very excited to be with you once again. Today, we're going to talk about the all encompassing networking or connections. That is just one of those terms that gets so used, it means a lot of different things to people. So, we're going to break it down today. We're going to talk about some strategies to make it easier for your attendees. Now, did you know this? 50% of people that go to conferences identify as introverted or socially reserved. They get their energy from within. They're not naturally outgoing and extroverted. Some of them are trained. They would call themselves ambiverts. Others are totally withdrawn. We had a lady at the conference that I recently hosted who wrote in our Facebook group something like this. She said, I came to the conference, I attended all the sessions, and I never met anyone. Now that I'm back home, I'm regretting that decision, and I'm wondering if any of you would like to be my friends. And that was at one level, I'm proud of her for reaching out and saying that and admitting that she wished that she had taken better advantage of the opportunities that were there. But there's another part of me that says, what did we not do right to make her comfortable, to make her feel like she could? And I think there's a lot of things that we as event organizers end up doing that don't make it easy for people who are maybe more socially reserved, or as Michaela Alexis is writing a book about, she's writing about networking for the socially anxious. Now, she told me that 80% of people, according to research, are at some level socially anxious. Um, Most of them don't admit it. Now, I've seen different research that says they're diagnosably socially anxious more like 13 to 15% of the time. So that is more of an extreme form where being in social settings makes you so anxious that you want to run away or not be there whatsoever. Someone who's made the attempt to go to a conference understands that there are things that can happen when they're at a conference that can't happen when they're watching a video like this, listening to a podcast, watching a YouTube video that breaks it down for them. There's so much that we can learn sitting at our desk today, that when they go to a conference, they know they're doing it to be in a social setting, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And the larger the event is, the harder it can be for people to break out of their shell. And for me, I'm actually socially introverted when I'm in a large group. Last night I was at a party for our church, and there were easily 100 plus people there. And I gravitate toward finding one person, maybe a couple people that I can talk to. And once I've talked to them, it's like, do I want to start another conversation? Do they want to talk to me? Do I want to break into this conversation? And if I'm starting to get tired, I'm like, no, I'm ready to leave because the social anxiety kicks in. Well, that's exactly what happens for people at our conferences. And so we need to do things to help them. And here's a few ideas of ways that you can make it easier for them. Number one, it starts before they ever get to the conference. So I encourage people for our conference or your conference to start connecting through some form of online group. We use a Facebook group. You might use some kind of app or some kind of tool like a community building tool like a Circle or a Mighty Networks or Heartbeat or one of those. You might use another group, doesn't really matter, but someplace that people can actually start to meet each other, connect with one another. And here's the second part of that. As they meet each other, they make plans to meet each other in person. That is one of the biggest icebreakers you can build into your plan, is make it easy for people to already know someone that they're going to see when they've flown halfway across the country, or maybe they've driven across town, whatever the case might be. If you walk into a room of strangers, it takes a while, even for the greatest extrovert, to feel comfortable. One of our speakers, she said to us in a video, she said, I am probably the world's greatest extrovert. I'm a natural salesperson. But when I got to your conference with 2,000 people and I walked in, got to the top of the escalator and looked around, I said, oh no, I don't know what to do. And I don't know anyone. And so for a while, she was feeling that anxiety, and she isn't introverted whatsoever. So there's things that we can do when we help people prepare in advance, They make those appointments. We give them the information. A lot of times that's the thing that someone who's more socially introverted needs is information on where do I go? Where do I find people? Where do I find answers? Maybe, here's a second tip, maybe they need places that are a bit quieter. I prefer to sit down and have a longer conversation with a few people versus meeting hundreds of people while I'm at an event. And that's important to recognize. So if you can create spaces where people can network in different kinds of ways, in general, if you have a room that seats 1,000 people and you just say, okay, it's time to network, a lot of people are like, nope, I'm going to my phone. I'm sticking to myself. I'm not sure I'm going to reach out and say anything. But if you break it down and make it easy, if you welcome people, if you introduce people, you give them easy ways to meet each other. John Berghoff is a master at this. He runs a group called Exchange Approach. And when he is the MC for a conference, he asks some very simple questions up front to get people talking to each other, things that are like no threat kinds of questions at first. Tell me about a hobby that you have. Tell me about something that kept you busy in the last week. What's your passion project? Something that like people don't have any problems talking about. And it's not necessarily the traditional, where are you from? What do you do? Those questions get really boring really fast. And sometimes it launches people into their elevator pitch, and that can be awkward. Elevator pitches are good for certain situations, but you can tell when somebody's rehearsed it too much. And I find that to be awkward. I would rather just get to know you. Tell me about yourself. What makes you tick? What keeps you awake at night? What kinds of things like that you can ask. So again, having different spaces where people can find people like themselves. Europeans in general, this is an over stereotype for sure, but in general, prefer to take it slower and in quieter spaces. Imagine sitting over a cup of coffee or tea and being able to get to know a few people at a more leisurely pace, as opposed to walking into a room and being like a ping pong ball and meeting a bunch of different people. So, uh, as you plan your event, as you plan your space, think about, what do you do before they ever get there? How do you help them meet each other? What kind of meetups can you do even before they ever get to the conference where they meet one another? And then how can you prepare them with information? How can you help them schedule meetups? You might use an app. You might use just your Facebook group. There might be ways that you say, you know what, we've got this program called Dinners for Eight. You can go on this Google Sheet and sign up for one of them. It's just random groups of people, or maybe they're organized by similar topic. We've had higher education professors who love to meet up with other professors. And so there will inevitably be a meetup of those kinds of people. So make it easy for people to schedule those meetups. And then once they're on site, have staff that is there. And this is another tip that I would give you, is have ambassadors. Ambassadors who before the event are helping people connect. And when they get on site, one of their main jobs is to be what Malcolm Gladwell calls a super connector, to use those super connector skills. When they meet someone, there's these bells going off in their head and say, I just met John, and John needs to meet Colleen because John and Colleen have this in common. So I'm going to make sure when I find John, I'm going to introduce him to Colleen. And they're just naturally thinking about those connections. And that can be one of the best gifts that you can give to somebody who's coming in feeling a little bit awkward. Like if somebody becomes a friend and finds out what your goals are and a little bit about you, and it says, you're going to have a great time here. I've already met 3 people like you. Can I introduce you to someone that I think you'd enjoy talking to you? That's what a networking ambassador can do on a very human level. Now, artificial intelligence through your mobile app or whatever kind of app you're using can enhance that, can actually suggest, hey, Colleen, you should go meet John. Here's why. You guys have this in common. And by the way, here's something you can ask John that might get the conversation started. That could be super powerful as a way to get networking going. All right. So pre-event, smaller groups, have meetups, have quieter spaces. Now let's talk about this idea between making connections and lead generation. Networking is really oftentimes connoted with lead generation. Like, I've got to meet 5 people because I need to fill the pipeline with leads so that the sales team can follow up with them and hopefully we can convert one of them into a sale. And some people go to events with that very goal in mind. The more leads they get, the more business there will be on the other end. They're more sales oriented, and that's a goal of going to an event. It's not a wrong goal. I'm not slamming that. That's a way business gets done, and that's a reason people go to events. That is one goal, but there are people going to events who might not have that as their goal. They might have the goal of, I want to meet some cool people. I want to have some deep, interesting conversations that I can't have when I'm at home, or I want to be able to talk about my work in a more relaxed environment because nobody where I live can relate to what I do with, and you name the discipline. Might be social media, it might be those of us here, event organizers. Maybe no one in our family understands the stress of being an event organizer. So you go and you find other people like you, and all of a sudden you can talk shop for hours and hours on end. And that is a benefit of going to an event. And you're not there to sell something to those people. You want to learn together. Maybe one day there'll be a relationship where they hire you, you hire them. There might be partnerships that are formed. There might be businesses that emerge. There might be new apps that are created, but it all starts a foundation of friendship and connection. So you need to understand your audience and the event that you're creating. Why are people coming? What is the goal that they have? And what's the goal that you have? Like, is your goal that you're trying to sell something at the end of the event? You're going to organize the event a little bit differently. Is your goal you want to build a community? You're trying to build a community and it's a long-term play for you, then you're going to approach networking and connections in a very different style. Now, there's another small way that you can get people to connect while they're on site. And that can be, some people call it birds of a feather, other call it table talks or round tables, or there's probably 100 names for this kind of concept, but it's small groups of people that are gathered around a specific topic to have a specific conversation while they are gathered at your event. Now, let's talk about parties for just a second. Networking parties aren't always a great place for networking because there's usually loud music going on and it's more about the fun than it is about the conversations. Again, not bad. Just understand what it is that you're creating. Now, if you know a lot of people are coming, in the case that I described at the beginning, people are coming and they're reserved, they're introverted, they want quiet spaces and deep conversations. If you can, try to have networking parties that have space for those who want the loud music and the dancing and the alcohol and whatever might be part of that. And there might be spaces for the quieter, or have alternatives. Suggest, hey, this may not be your cup of tea. This might not be the place that you want to be, but hey, there are a lot of cool places that you can go to hang out and have quiet dinners. And we encourage you to arrange your own, or maybe even you as the organizer arrange alternatives. People love options. I know it's harder for you as an organizer to create options, but if you empower people, give them the information on how to create their own options, people will often run with it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, you don't want people coming to a networking party and being miserable, because that's not the kind of party they enjoy going to. Now, flip side, when people go to an event, one of the things they go for is to do things they can't do at home. So if your audience is, your typical 35 to 45-year-old mom who, works for a business or owns her own business, and she's getting away and she wants to let her hair down because she gets a weekend away from some of her home responsibilities, you would like to give her a chance to do some things that she can't do at home. Maybe that's by creating space in your schedule. Maybe that is by creating events where she's going to do something that she couldn't afford to do on her own, but you can because you're an event organizer. So again, these are a number of ways that you can design experiences for people at your event that facilitate networking. You want to make people feel safe. You want them to feel like they are welcome. You want to have people available that introduce deeper levels of conversation, that are on the lookout for people who are maybe holding back, who are maybe hiding on their phones or maybe hiding in the corners, the wallflowers, as they call them. I did that in middle school dances. I was the wallflower. I wasn't going to go out and ask the girl. It took a lot of courage. And that same dynamic happens at events. Like you're going into the cafeteria and you're wondering, what table am I going to sit at? Is anyone going to be okay and inviting of me to sit at their table? Make it easy. And if you've got alumni at your event, let them be on the lookout for those who look like they have deer in the headlight syndrome. All right. So that's all of my tips. Now, I wanted to end this with a little bit of an experiment that I'd like to do. And I know a couple of you are watching right now. So if you would drop in the chat how you typically approach an event. Like, what do you feel like when you're approaching an event? Do you feel like you're more the wallflower or you're the pinball? You're a pinball that's bumping around. You love meeting everybody. You're the activator. You're getting everybody going. Or you tend to be a bit more of the wallflower and it takes a lot of courage to pull you out. Or is there another metaphor that you would use? If you can, drop that in the chat. I would love to see what you're thinking, what you're experiencing when you're at an event, because I'm going to do something I've not tried before, but I'm going to create the experience of a networker at a conference with music, because that's what I do. So since I am not getting a response from anybody, we are going to take the journey of a wallflower meets a pinball. All right, so this is going to be a very interesting experiment we're going to do here. Imagine a wallflower is the networker who's sitting against the wall, looking at her phone, doesn't really want to engage. And then you've got Joe Pinball, who's bumping around and meeting everybody. He meets Sally, the wallflower, and he somehow encourages her to step into the networking dance at the conference. So that's what I'm going to try to play right now. I've never tried this before. See what you think. The wallflower meets the pinball. There you go. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. And I hope you enjoy the events that you are planning. Have an amazing day.